I never meant for things to get this bad. I swear. My name is Lauren. I'm 34 years old, and until last week, I thought I had everything under control. My life wasn't perfect, no one's is, but it was stable. I had a husband, a daughter, and a home filled with love. Or at least that's what I told myself. But one birthday party was all it took to unravel everything. Our daughter, Chloe, had just turned 13. We threw a little party for her, nothing extravagant. Just a few close friends. Some cake and pizza, and a handful of parents hanging around the house, making small talk while the kids laughed and played. Ethan, my husband, did his usual thing, grilling hot dogs on the patio, nodding politely at the other dads, staying out of the way when the girls started shrieking over whatever game they were playing in the living room. That was Ethan, steady, reliable, a little boring, if I'm being honest, but dependable. I never had to wonder where he was or what he was thinking. At least, not until that night. It started like any other birthday party. The kids were in high spirits, running back and forth between the living room and the backyard, stuffing their faces with chips and soda. The parents, meanwhile, stuck to their usual small talk, school fundraisers, sports schedules, vacation plans. I had just stepped onto the patio with Jessica, one of the moms, who was rambling about an upcoming bake sale at school. I nodded along, pretending to care, while Ethan excused himself and went inside. It wasn't unusual for him to disappear for a bit. He wasn't much for small talk, especially with overly chatty moms. But when I walked back into the house a few minutes later, something felt off. The energy in the room had changed. It wasn't loud and chaotic like before. It was quieter, more tense. And then I saw Ethan. He was standing in the hallway, just outside Chloe's bedroom door. His face was pale, his lips pressed into a thin, tight line. His whole body was stiff, like he'd just been punched in the stomach. I followed his gaze, confused, until I heard it, Chloe's voice, drifting out of her room, clear as day over the giggles of her friends. "He's not even my real dad." She said it like it was the funniest thing in the world. Like it was some inside joke between her and her friends. My mom said he doesn't even know. The giggles turned into outright laughter. The room started spinning. My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might be sick. Ethan didn't move. He didn't turn to look at me. He just stood there, staring at the door, his jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might crack. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I needed to say something, anything, to fix this. Kids say stupid things all the time. I whispered, stepping closer to him, my voice barely above a breath. I reached for his arm, desperate to ground him, to bring him back to me. He jerked away like I'd burned him. "She probably doesn't even know what she's talking about," I added quickly, my voice trembling. Ethan finally turned to me. And when he did, I wished he hadn't. His eyes were dark, unreadable, full of something I couldn't quite name. It wasn't just anger. It was something worse. "Does she?" he asked. His voice low and sharp. Each word like a blade slicing through me. I swallowed hard. "Does she even know what she's talking about? Lauren?" I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Because I didn't have an answer. Ethan didn't wait for one. Without another word, he turned and walked straight out the front door. I stood there, frozen, my pulse hammering in my ears. The party was still going on, kids laughing, music playing, parents chatting in the background like nothing had happened. Like my whole world hadn't just come crashing down around me. I forced myself to move, to breathe, to smile and nod at the other parents as I drifted through the rest of the evening in a haze. I don't even remember saying goodbye to them. I just remember standing at the sink after everyone left, staring at my phone, waiting for Ethan to call. He didn't. The hours passed. Chloe went to bed, completely oblivious to the storm she had just set in motion. By midnight, I was still sitting on the couch, my phone in my hands, staring at the blank screen. And then, finally, just as I was starting to lose hope, the front door creaked open. Ethan stepped inside. He didn't slam the door. He didn't yell. He didn't throw accusations in my face. That almost made it worse. He sat down across from me, his face unreadable, and said 4 words that sent ice through my veins. We need to talk. Ethan sat across from me. His hands clasped together, his shoulders tense. The weight of his stare was suffocating. We need to talk. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my expression neutral. But my hands were already shaking in my lap. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear anything else. I forced a nervous laugh. Ethan, come on. You're not seriously upset about what Chloe said, are you? You know how kids are. She probably overheard something at school or... Don't. The single word was sharp, cutting through my pathetic attempt at deflection. Ethan's voice was eerily calm. But his eyes were cold. Does she even know what she's talking about? He asked again, repeating the same question from earlier. Or was she telling the truth? My throat went dry. I knew this was it. The moment I had feared for years. I had to choose my words carefully. Of course she's your daughter, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. Ethan didn't blink. Then why would she say that? Why would she tell her friends that you told her I wasn't her father? I hesitated, searching for a way out. I don't know. I stammered. Maybe she's just being dramatic. You know how teenagers are. They say things for attention. To make themselves seem important. Cut the crap, Lauren. I flinched. Ethan never raised his voice. Not even now. But the way he spoke, the coldness in his tone, was somehow worse than yelling. He knew. Or at least, he suspected. Just tell me the truth, he said, his voice lower this time. Is she mine or not? I felt my whole body start to shake. I had spent years perfecting my lies. Convincing myself that I was protecting our family. That the truth didn't matter as long as we were happy. But now, with Ethan looking at me like a stranger, I realized how fragile my carefully constructed world really was. She's yours, I said again, but it came out too fast. Too rehearsed. Ethan stared at me, unblinking, like he could see straight through me. You're lying. I shook my head. I'm not. Then say it again. Look me in the eye and tell me the truth. Lauren. My lips parted, but nothing came out. Because I couldn't. I couldn't look at him and lie to his face. Not when the truth was clawing its way to the surface. Threatening to choke me. Ethan exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. God. Lauren. He pushed himself up from the couch, pacing the living room, his hands clenched into fists. How long? I blinked. What? How long have you known she wasn't mine? I hesitated, then admitted the truth in the smallest voice possible. Since the beginning. Ethan froze. For a moment, he just stood there, his back to me, his shoulders rising and falling with each breath. Then he turned, and the look in his eyes made my stomach turn to stone. Since the beginning? He repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded slowly, feeling like I was about to be sick. Ethan let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. So, let me get this straight. You knew from the start. And you just let me believe she was mine? You let me raise her for 13 years without ever telling me the truth? I didn't do it to hurt you. I burst out. I did it because I love you. Ethan, because I knew you'd be a better father to her than. I stopped myself before I could say his name. But Ethan caught it. His jaw tightened. Then who? Lauren? I didn't answer. Who's her father? He demanded. I shook my head. It doesn't matter. He's not in the picture. He never wanted to be. Ethan let out another bitter laugh, rubbing a hand over his face. It doesn't matter? Are you kidding me? It matters to me. It matters because I've been living a lie for 13 years. I felt the tears coming. But I forced them back. I couldn't break down now. I never meant to lie to you. I whispered. I was scared. I thought if I told you, you'd leave me. Ethan stared at me for a long moment. Then shook his head. And now? I swallowed hard. Now I know I was wrong. He let out a breath. His expression unreadable. Yeah, he said softly. You were. Then he turned and walked toward the front door. Panic surged through me. Ethan, wait. Don't call me. I froze. I need time to think. He said, gripping the doorknob. And I don't want to hear from you until you're ready to tell me the whole truth. Then he was gone. The silence that followed was deafening. I collapsed onto the couch. My entire body shaking. My hands clenched into fists. My nails digging into my palms. I had been so afraid of losing Ethan that I had clung to the lie for too long. And now, I might have lost him anyway. Ethan was gone. The house felt emptier than ever. Even though Chloe was still asleep upstairs, completely unaware of the storm that had just torn through our lives. I sat on the couch, staring at the front door like I could will him to walk back in. To take it all back. But I knew he wouldn't. Not this time. The truth was out, or at least part of it. I had known this moment would come eventually. I had spent years convincing myself that it wouldn't. That I could keep the past buried. That no one would ever have to know. But now, it was unraveling faster than I could stop it. And the worst part? Ethan wasn't even asking the hardest questions yet. I curled up against the arm of the couch, pulling a throw blanket around me. But it did nothing to stop the chill in my bones. My phone sat on the coffee table, dark and silent. No missed calls, no messages. I wanted to call him. I wanted to beg him to come home. To tell him it didn't matter. That nothing had changed because he had always been Chloe's father in every way that counted. But that was a lie, too, wasn't it? Not the part about him being her father, because in my heart, I knew he was. But the idea that nothing had changed? Everything had changed. Because now he knew. And even if he didn't have the full story yet, I could already feel him slipping away. I pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to stop the tears. But it was useless. My mind was already spiraling back to the moment this all began. Back to him. To Ryan, the man I had tried to erase. I hadn't thought about Ryan in years. Not really. Every time his name tried to creep into my thoughts, I shoved it away, locked it up somewhere deep where I wouldn't have to deal with it. But now, with Ethan gone and everything crashing down around me, I couldn't push it away anymore. I let my head fall back against the couch and closed my eyes. And just like that, I was 21 again. 13 years ago, I was fresh out of college, working my first real job at a marketing agency. Still caught up in the thrill of being independent, of making my own money, of finally feeling like an adult. And then there was Ryan. He wasn't the kind of guy you married. I had known that from the start. He was charming in a way that made it easy to overlook the red flags. The way he never talked about the future. The way he always had one foot out the door. But I was young, and reckless, and I told myself that it didn't matter. It wasn't love. It wasn't even serious. It was just fun. Until it wasn't. Until I saw those 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test and felt my entire world tilt sideways. I had told Ryan, of course. I wasn't stupid. I hadn't expected him to be excited. But I also hadn't expected him to look at me the way he did. Like I had just ruined his life. Are you sure it's mine? He had asked. His voice flat. That was all it took. One sentence. And I knew. Ryan wasn't going to be there for me. He wasn't going to be there for Chloe. And suddenly, the little fantasy one had been living in shattered. I had walked out of his apartment that night and never looked back. I never told him when Chloe was born. I never reached out to see if he changed his mind. I had made my choice. I had chosen Ethan. And I had spent every day since then trying to make that choice a reality. Trying to pretend that Ryan had never existed. Trying to pretend that I hadn't built my entire life on a lie. Present day. I opened my eyes, blinking against the harsh light of the living room. Ryan was gone. He had been gone for years. But his shadow was still here. Still looming over everything I had tried to build. And now, Ethan knew. Not about Ryan, not yet. But he knew enough. He knew that Chloe wasn't his. He knew that I had lied. And soon, he would start asking the real questions. Would he want to know who Chloe's real father was? Would he try to track Ryan down? Would Chloe? The thought made my stomach twist. I had spent 13 years protecting her from that man. Making sure she never had to know the kind of person he was. But maybe I wasn't protecting her at all. Maybe I was just protecting myself. Because if she ever found out the truth, if she ever knew that her real father had never wanted her, how could she ever forgive me for lying to her? For choosing Ethan without ever giving her a say? For making a decision that had shaped her whole life before she was even born? I wiped my face with the sleeve of my sweater, trying to pull myself together. It didn't matter right now. What mattered was Ethan. What mattered was saving my marriage before it was too late. Because if I lost him, I wasn't sure I'd survive it. I reached for my phone, my hands still shaking, and pulled up his contact. I hesitated. I didn't know what I was going to say. But I had to say something. Before I lost him for good. Before Chloe lost the only real father she had ever known. I took a deep breath, bracing myself, and hit call. The phone rang once, twice, then straight to voicemail. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced my voice to stay steady. Ethan, please, just call me back. I hung up and stared at the screen, waiting for a response that I wasn't sure would ever come. The next few days felt like I was living in some kind of limbo, waiting for a call. A text, a sign that Ethan was coming home. But there was nothing. I called him again the morning after he left. Straight to voicemail. I sent a few texts. Please come home. We need to talk. Chloe is asking about you. I love you, but they all went unanswered. Chloe noticed, of course. She wasn't a little kid anymore. She asked where he was, why he wasn't answering, and I gave her the only excuse I could think of. He's on a work trip. Sweetheart. It wasn't completely a lie. Ethan had traveled for work before. But this wasn't a trip. And we both knew it. By the third day, the silence was unbearable. Every room in the house felt wrong without him in it. His shoes were still by the door. His jacket still hung on the coat rack. His toothbrush still sat in the bathroom, but he wasn't here. And I had no idea if he ever would be again. Then, that night, just past 10, I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. My heart leapt into my throat. I scrambled off the couch, nearly knocking over my wine glass in the process. My legs felt shaky as I rushed to the window, peeking through the blinds. Ethan. I yanked open the door before he even reached the porch. Ethan. My voice was breathless, filled with relief. But he didn't look relieved. He looked tired. His face was drawn, his shoulders stiff, his jaw tight in a way that made my stomach twist. I stepped aside, silently inviting him in. For a second, I thought he was going to refuse. He just stood there, staring at me like he was trying to decide if this was still his home. Then, finally, he stepped inside. The moment the door shut behind him, the tension became suffocating. He didn't kiss me. He didn't touch me. He didn't even look at me. Instead, he walked past me, straight toward the bedroom. I followed, my pulse pounding. Are you staying? I asked, hesitant. He didn't answer right away. He was pulling clothes out of the closet, shoving them into a duffel bag. My stomach dropped. Ethan, what are you doing? My voice wavered. Still, he didn't look at me. I need answers, Lauren, he said finally, his tone quiet but firm. And until I get them, I can't be here. I felt a cold rush of panic. I told you the truth, I said quickly. Chloe is yours, Ethan, maybe not biologically, but in every way that matters. That made him pause. Slowly, he turned to face me. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were darker than I had ever seen them. But you lied to me, he said. For 13 years, I didn't want to lose you. He let out a bitter laugh. And now you might lose me anyway. My chest tightened. I don't want that. Ethan, I love you. Do you? His voice was sharp. Because it sure as hell doesn't feel like it. You let me believe Chloe was mine. You let me build my entire life around a lie. She is yours. I cried. You raised her. You love her. But she's not mine. Lauren. His voice rose. And I flinched. She's Ryan's, isn't she? Silence. I felt like the room was caving in. Ethan exhaled, shaking his head. I knew it, he muttered. I swallowed hard. My throat felt tight, like it was closing up. Ryan never wanted her, I whispered. He walked away before she was even born. He doesn't matter. Ethan, you do. His jaw clenched. And you didn't think I had the right to know that? I was scared. No, he said, his voice cold. You were selfish. The words stung. He slung the duffel bag over his shoulder. Brushing past me, I grabbed his arm, desperation clawing at my chest. Where are you going? To Sarah's, he said, his tone flat. His sister. Of course. Ethan, Please. I begged. Don't do this. Don't walk away from us. For the first time that night, something flickered in his expression. Hurt. I already did, he said softly. Then he was gone. And this time, I had no idea if he was coming back. Ethan was gone. For the first few days, I told myself he just needed time. That he would cool off. Come home. And we'd talk like we always did after an argument. But as the silence stretched between us, as my texts went unanswered and my calls went straight to voicemail, I started to realize, this wasn't just a fight. This was something deeper, something worse. I had shattered something between us. And I didn't know if I could ever put it back together. Chloe noticed. Of course, she did. Where's Dad? She asked on the fourth day, standing in the kitchen as I numbly stared at the coffee machine, waiting for a cup I wasn't even sure I wanted. I forced a smile, but it felt wrong on my face. He's just staying at Aunt Sarah's for a bit. Sweetie, he needed some space. Chloe frowned. Why? I hesitated. It's just grown-up stuff. Did you fight? I exhaled. Yeah, we fought. Her face scrunched up in worry. Is he coming back? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell her that everything was fine. That her dad would be home soon. That we'd all sit down for dinner like we always did. But I couldn't bring myself to lie. Because I didn't know the answer. I hope so, I said softly. Chloe didn't say anything else. She just nodded, then turned and walked out of the kitchen. I knew she was upset. But she didn't press the issue. She was old enough to understand that something was wrong. But not old enough to see the full picture. And God, I prayed she wouldn't. I wasn't ready for her to know the truth. I wasn't ready for her to know that the man she called Dad might not want to be her dad anymore. The call that changed everything. It wasn't until a week after Ethan left that I heard from him again. I was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV, some crime show playing in the background. The voices blending into white noise, when my phone vibrated on the coffee table. Ethan. My stomach clenched. I grabbed the phone so fast I almost dropped it, my fingers fumbling as I answered. Ethan? We need to talk. His voice was cold, distant. My throat tightened. Okay, when? Now. 10 minutes later, I was sitting across from him at a coffee shop a few blocks from the house. He looked different, tired, like he hadn't been sleeping. I wanted to reach across the table, to take his hand in mine, to tell him how much I missed him. But something in his expression stopped me. I've been thinking, he started, his voice measured, careful, and I've come to a decision. My chest tightened. Ethan, I can't do this anymore. Lauren. It felt like the ground beneath me disappeared. What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I mean, I can't pretend like everything is fine. I can't pretend like nothing has changed. Chloe isn't mine. She never was. I flinched. She is yours, I argued, my voice desperate. Maybe not biologically, but in every way that matters. You've raised her. She loves you. His jaw tightened. But she's not mine, Lauren. And I don't think I can keep pretending that she is. I shook my head, my pulse hammering. You're not pretending. Ethan, you are her father. You always have been. That doesn't change just because of. It changes everything. He cut me off. Every moment I've spent with her. Every memory we've made. It's all been built on a lie. A lie you told me. Tears burned my eyes. I was trying to protect us. No, you were trying to protect yourself. He shot back. You didn't want to face the consequences of your choices. So you buried them. And now? Now you expect me to just accept it? I swallowed hard. I just want our family back. He exhaled, looking away for a moment before meeting my eyes again. I can't be her father anymore. Lauren. The words knocked the breath from my lungs. You don't mean that. I do. His voice didn't waver. I'm done. I reached for his hand. But he pulled away. Ethan, please. I whispered. I'm sorry, he said, standing up. But I can't do this. I can't be a father to someone who isn't mine. I need to walk away. I watched in horror as he turned and left. I wanted to chase after him. To scream that he was making a mistake. That Chloe still needed him. That I still needed him. But I couldn't move. Because deep down, I knew I had already lost him. The aftermath. When I got home, Chloe was waiting. Her eyes were red, like she had been crying. "Was that Dad?" she asked. Her voice small. I nodded slowly. "Is he coming back?" I hesitated. And that was all she needed. She turned away, walking toward the stairs. "Chloe, just leave me alone." I watched her disappear into her room. The sound of her door closing behind her echoing in the silence. And then, finally, I let myself break. I sank onto the couch, pulling my knees to my chest, and sobbed. I had lied. I had kept secrets. And now, I had lost everything. My husband, my family, and maybe, just maybe, my daughter too. Ethan was gone. It had been days since our conversation at the coffee shop, and the silence in the house was unbearable. His absence was everywhere, in the unwashed coffee mug on the counter, the way the bed felt too big, the empty space by the front door where his shoes used to be. I hadn't heard from him since. No calls, no texts. And Chloe? She barely spoke to me. She had locked herself away in her room, only emerging for meals or school. And even then, she avoided me. The light in her eyes had dimmed. The easy smiles and playful sarcasm replaced with quiet indifference. I had broken something in her. Just like I had broken something in Ethan. And I didn't know if I could fix either. A conversation I wasn't ready for. The hardest part wasn't Ethan leaving. It was knowing that Chloe had questions I wasn't ready to answer. I had spent her whole life protecting her from the truth, shielding her from the reality of who Ryan was, of how she came to be. I had convinced myself I was doing it for her. But now, I wasn't so sure. So when she finally spoke, when she finally asked the question I had been dreading, I wasn't ready. It was late. She had come downstairs while I was sitting at the dining table, staring at a half-eaten plate of food. "Is Dad ever coming back?" Her voice was quiet, uncertain, like she was afraid of the answer. I looked up, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I don't know." She hesitated, then sat across from me, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Why did he leave?" I took a shaky breath. "Because I lied to him," I admitted. Chloe frowned. "About what?" I looked at her, my heart breaking all over again. This was it. This was the moment I had spent 13 years avoiding. "About you," I whispered. She blinked. "Me?" I nodded, my hands trembling in my lap. "About your father." Her expression changed, confusion. Then something else, something like fear. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I felt like I was suffocating. But I forced myself to say it. "Ethan isn't your biological father." The words hung in the air between us, thick and heavy. Chloe's face went pale. "What?" "I met someone before I met Ethan. His name was Ryan. I swallowed hard. He's the one who." "Stop," she whispered. I did. I watched as she processed it. As the reality of my words sank in, her hands clenched into fists, her jaw tightening. "So all this time, you lied to me." "I was trying to protect you," I pleaded. "Ryan was never a good man. Chloe, he never wanted to be a father. He walked away before you were even born. I didn't want you to grow up feeling unwanted. So you just decided for me?" she snapped. "You decided I didn't need to know? That I didn't deserve the truth? I thought I was doing the right thing." She let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "That's what Dad said too. Before he left." The words cut deeper than I expected. I wanted to tell her that Ethan still loved her. That no matter what, she was still his daughter in every way that mattered. But I didn't know if that was true anymore. And I couldn't bring myself to lie again. Chloe's choice. Chloe pushed back from the table, standing up so fast the chair scraped against the floor. "Where are you going?" I asked, panic rising in my chest. She turned toward the stairs but hesitated. "Did you ever try to find him?" I didn't have to ask who she meant. "No," she scoffed, crossing her arms. "Why not?" "Because he didn't want to be found. Chloe, he made that clear. Maybe he changed." She shot back. I shook my head. "People like Ryan don't change." "You don't know that," she said, her voice tight. "You never gave him a chance." Tears burned my eyes. I was trying to give you the best life possible. A life with a father who actually wanted you. And now I don't have one at all. I sucked in a breath. But she was already walking away. I listened as she climbed the stairs. The sound of her bedroom door slamming shut echoing through the house. And just like that, I realized, I hadn't just lost Ethan. I was losing her too. The next step. I barely slept that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation over and over in my head. Chloe was right. I had decided for her. I had kept Ryan a secret because I was afraid of what he might do. What he might say. I had convinced myself I was protecting her when, really, I had just been protecting myself. But now, she wanted to know, and I couldn't stop her. So the next morning, I did something I never thought I'd do. I sat down at my laptop. I pulled up a search bar. And I typed in his name. Ryan Carter. My hands shook as I hit enter. Because I knew, whatever I found, whatever happened next, there was no going back. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps out. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. We've got plenty more stories coming your way, and you won't want to miss them. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done in this situation? Thanks for being part of our community. And we'll see you in the next video. Stay tuned.